Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It's Rock and Roll Podcast with another installment of Mutant Monday, and this time we'll be talking about the 10 best X-Men stories. This might be involved, so we'll just set it down for the moment. It'll be a visual aid for later, if any, at best. So, I've just a heads up. This week's Mutant Monday, as well as next week's Mutant Monday, will both be top 10 best stories list. This week will be focused on the X-Men as a whole. Next week on Wolverine. Suggestion, request of a friend of the channel. So, let's get started, shall we? Starting at the bottom of the list, we've got House of M. So, House of M is kind of a cheat. That's part of why it's at the bottom. Because it's just as much as it is an X-Men story, it's also an Avengers story. The basic idea, Scarlet Witch goes nuts. Remakes reality and makes a perfect world where everyone gets what they want. Turns out that, and by doing so, she has put Magneto basically in charge of the world from Genosha, and mutants in the majority of the population. So, it's the core series itself is actually pretty decent. It's written by Brian Michael Bendis, so it can be a bit polarizing, as he himself does be polarizing. It's also very wordy. Also, it's actually very similar to the first Matrix movie. You've got a world, this perfect world you've got this world that, and some people know it's just not right, and so they try and change it. But it actually led to some major changes for the X-Men. Decimation. The whole decimation concept spun out of this, which we'll get that will come up later. So, well, some of it. Next up, we've got Mutant Massacre. Now, this is a story that sadly suffers from being the victim of various retcons over the years, but it focuses on the Marauders, a mutant hit squad put together by Mr. Sinister, attacking the Morlocks, a large group of deformed mutants living underneath Manhattan. And the Morlocks being defended by the various X teams. There were some important things in it. For example, it would come as the first time any of the X-Men outside of X Factor, which was at that time consisted of the original 5 X-Men, knew that Jean Grey was still alive, as Wolverine had seen her during or at least caught her scent during the fight. Also, Angel would. This is a story where Angel's wings got injured, leading to his having them amputated and getting the biometallic wings from Apocalypse and becoming the Horseman of Death. Now, some of the retcons that are involved that happened. First off, the big one to me is the casualties. So, at first, the X-Men writers said, "Oh yes, the Morlocks were practically wiped out. There was hardly any of them left." That changed to, well, Marauders killed most of the Morlocks. Some of them escaped. And there was actually a story in the late 280s of Uncanny X-Men with Mikhail Rasputin, Colossus's brother, taking the remaining Morlocks to another dimension. And then it just became, there was still quite... Apparently the Marauders did not do that great a job at killing the Morlocks, because there's still been plenty. In fact, there's... Currently in the X books, there are mutants living underground in the New York City subway tunnels. Next up, we had the involvement of Gambit. Basically, this was kind of this is why Sinister has an interest in Gambit. It was revealed after a while that Mr. Sinister and Gambit were somehow connected. Well, Gambit went to Sinister for a favor, or for some help. Sinister wanted a favor. He helped put together the Morlocks and then led them to the tunnels. And as the story goes, when he saw that they were killing the Morlocks, he was just like, "Oh!" And so he did what he could to save at least any of the Morlocks, and he did. In fact, he saved a young girl named Sarah, who would grow up to become Mara. Finally came the reason for the massacre. So it came off initially just kind of, okay, Mr. Sinister wanted to kill the Morlocks because he's evil. But after the Age of Apocalypse, it turns out that the Age of Apocalypse Beast, known primarily as Dark Beast, came to ended up in the 20 years previously point of the time point in the story, and was stuck in the prime reality then. And so, as him, a student of Mr. Sinister, he experimented on mutants in the various tunnels underneath Manhattan, creating the Morlocks. And so Sinister recognized his work and was like, "Oh, this is a crude imitation of my work. It must be wiped out." So, yeah. Next up on the list, we've got Executioner's Song. Now, okay, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit biased here. This is actually the first X-Men story I read, so, yeah. But the story begins with an assassination attempt on Professor X, seemingly by Cable. It also includes 3 of the X teams joining forces, multiple big bad villains, and kind of actually works in various story arcs quite well. And yes, it is kind of a big dumb 90s story, but it's still at least halfway decently done, and it had lasting effects for more than 5 years. So yeah, and that the lasting effect namely being the legacy virus, a disease which would only affect mutants. Next up, we've got the Messiah trilogy. Oh. Like this bad boy. So, the Messiah trilogy. After House of M, the mutant population of Earth was reduced from at least multiple millions to 198. It's referred to as decimation or M-Day. Then, suddenly, there was a mutant birth. That's where the Messiah trilogy begins, with Messiah Complex. Kicking the trilogy off with the first mutant birth after the end of House of M. And then you have various factions trying to claim the baby. The X-Men, the Marauders, the Purifiers, yeah. Next up is Messiah War. Now, Messiah War did not actually happen in the pages of X-Men or of X-Men itself. It happened in the pages of X-Force and Cable. But Messiah War continues the Messiah trilogy, with Wolverine's X-Force squad being sent to the future to help Cable defend the mutant Messiah. And finally, we have Second Coming, the conclusion of the trilogy, wherein Cable and Hope, the mutant Messiah, return to the present with the idea that she'll respark the mutant race. But she also draws the violent attention of various anti-mutant groups that are working together to finally wipe out mutants once and for all. There's actually some really big ideas. I think Messiah Complex and Second Coming are probably the 2 best parts of that, with Messiah War kind of being but Messiah Complex kicked off the whole Wolverine leading X-Force concept, which would spill into multiple titles afterwards. And in fact, the X-Force title would set up the main villains in Second Coming, the human council, as it were, and see them as they're all characters who've been brought back from the dead with a technovirus. Next up, we've got Grant Morrison's entire run on New X-Men. So this ended just as I was getting back into comics, but it kicks off with E is for Extinction and a massive Sentinel attack on Genosha, which claims 16 million mutants in one fell swoop. Morrison's run would then delve deeper into the Weapon X program, introduce the concept of secondary mutations, and focus on the Xavier Institute as a school as much as the X-Men's base. There would also be more There would be more information given on the Phoenix and Jean Grey's relation to it. There are things I don't like about the run, but it is an important run, and there are themes, ideas, and characters that resonate still that were introduced that came up here. So yeah. Next up, we've got Joss Whedon's entire Astonishing X-Men run. So I know that Joss Whedon is not exactly a favored person anymore, but yeah. So yeah, Whedon's run on Astonishing was a major coup when it was announced. It was like, oh my god, Joss Whedon's going to write the X-Men. This is going to, and he actually knocked it out of the park. He put it together his team, which was Cyclops, Wolverine, Emma Frost, Shadowcat, and Beast, as well as Colossus. And he, for one thing, did a good amount of picking up the pieces of the Grant Morrison run. At the end of the near the end of the Grant Morrison run, I believe it was the next to last story, Magneto attacks Manhattan with his new Brotherhood, and just about lays Manhattan Island to waste. And then the X-Men manage to stop him, or come to fight him, and it all comes down to Wolverine cutting Magneto's head off after Magneto has killed Jean Grey. And so yeah, mutants were once again feared and hated. And so now the X-Men had to, get back to a point of maybe, trying to be heroes again. The run would also introduce the concept of the mutant cure, as seen in X-Men 3. In fact, there was still the mutant cure was still fairly new when X-Men 3 got made. So yeah, the Danger Room as a sentient and tortured artificial intelligence. Sword, a sister agency to S.H.I.E.L.D. that dealt with off-world threats. There were also inter-team relationships as well, and how the public perception of the X-Men. The 4 stories that make up the overall 25-issue run, which is Astonishing X-Men 1 through 24, plus a one-shot to cap things off. But every character gets moments to shine. Not usually with a run, you'll have one character getting a moment here. They each have one moment over the course of the run, but no, they all had multiple moments to shine throughout the course of the run, and it was a really great X-Men run. It also did, like I mentioned with Morrison's run, how there was some focus on the Xavier School as a school that continues on in Whedon's Astonishing run. Next up, we've got Days of Future Past. So, Days of Future Past has been watered down over the years through various spin-off tales, related tales, so on and so forth. It's still one of the best X-Men stories. It's a short 2-part story. It shows a dystopian 20 years in the future point where the Sentinels where mutants are imprisoned by Sentinels, and the, to be fair, Sentinels have pretty much taken over. All the heroes are most of the superheroes of the present are either imprisoned, are at best imprisoned, or at worst dead. And so, Kitty Pryde manages to go to psionically time travel. No, really, it's a thing, kinda in a weird way. Her older self, she has her older self has her psyche sent, or her mind sent back to the past when she was a teenager, to in an attempt to prevent this future from coming to pass, which includes at that point the the turning point was the assassination of Senator Kelly by Mystique. So the X-Men have to prevent that. But you also see stuff that's going on in that future as well. Probably one of the more well-known images from it is Wolverine leaping in a Sentinel, only to be blasted by a Sentinel's hand ray and having the flesh seared off, and all that's left is the adamantium skeleton, which would end up becoming playing a part in a Guardians of the Galaxy story in the 90s. Next up, we've got God Loves, Man Kills. So God Loves, Man Kills was done as a part of Marvel graphic novels back in the early 80s. It's also partially the basis for the second X-Men movie. But it introduces one of the most persistent X-Men villains to date, Reverend William Stryker, and various incarnations of his church. Stryker has become such a long-running thorn in the X-Men side, and has been killed on numerous occasions by the X-Men. In fact, he gets killed in the Second Coming, even. But he always comes back. And it was actually, in fact, recently in the Weapon X, the last arc of the Weapon X series, it was revealed that he keeps coming back because now, or at this point, because he made a deal with the devil. But it's such a great story, and I mean, it shows how faith can be weaponized, and the definite downsides of that. Anyways, next up we've got Age of Apocalypse with the addition of Legion Quest. So, Age of Apocalypse is probably one of the best alternate reality tales to ever in comics. It consisted of, let's see, X-Men, Excalibur, Astonishing X-Men, Amazing X-Men, Excalibur, Weapon X, X-Man, Factor X. I want to say a grand total of 28 issues. You had about 6 4-issue miniseries, 2 bookend one-shots, X-Men Alpha, X-Men Omega, and then there was 30, yeah, because I've heard all about X Universe. And then there was an X-Men Unlimited, 2 quarterly issues done on that gave some backstory. And then there was X Universe, which then said, okay, here's what all the other characters have been up to. And it was actually rather depressing. But we see it's a dystopic reality where Apocalypse is taking over North America after the death of Professor X 20 years previously. What's really interesting is seeing how the lack of Xavier's influence changes various characters. Cyclops and Havoc, for example, are the adopted sons of Mr. Sinister. Magneto runs the X-Men and is married to Rogue. Colossus and Shadowcat are training the next generation of mutant kind. So on and so forth. Then I also mentioned Legion Quest. So Legion Quest took place, I want to say, in both Uncanny X-Men and X-Men, but it featured Legion, Xavier's son, going back in time, figuring, hey, if I kill Magneto before before the X-Men are formed, then my father will have time to be with me. Then I can actually be raised by my father. And we discover that Legion has time travel abilities. The thing with Legion is that each personality has its own power, but we never. It was stated that at that point we never saw his power, just the other personalities, and so his was said to be time travel. So he goes back in time, and then a handful of X-Men follow him back, and there ends up being this big fight between the X-Men and Legion trying to protect Magneto. All the while, the Mcron crystal is expanding on the world, or on the universe. But as Legion's about to kill Magneto, Xavier gets in the way and dies instead. And so Magneto, of course, promises to see Xavier's dream come to fruition, and so he starts the X-Men. Yeah. So yeah, that's Legion Quest. It's basically the prologue. Those sorts. Now we got some honorable mentions. We got first up on the list is Inferno. Now Inferno, it's a good story. Don't get me wrong, it really is, and it's one of the major '80s '90s X-Men stories. But it really just does not feel like an X-Men story. It feels like it's the X-Men fighting demons. Yeah, there's some science fiction stuff thrown in there as well, but it's mostly just the X-Men fighting demons. That's a simplified version of it. Very simplified, I'm not gonna lie. Next up is Extinction Agenda, and this is one it's another one of the really important ones. Double Genosha. And the X-Men, X-Factor, and the New Mutants all go to... Some of their members are killed and kidnapped, so the rest of them go to Genosha to save them, and... yeah. They managed to overthrow the bigoted government for a little while. Next up, we've got recent Extermination. So Extermination was the culmination... of a long-running arc in the current X-Men books, which saw Beast having gone back in time and bringing the original 5 X-Men to the present, hoping maybe if they saw what was in store, maybe they'd make different choices. Like maybe I don't know, Cyclops wouldn't kill Professor X while all phoenixed up. But Extermination dealt with Ahab, who's from the Days of Future Past timeline, coming back in time to figuring if he kills the original 5 X-Men now, when they're still teenagers, he can wipe the X-Men out of the timeline altogether. So he tries. He comes back to do it. Then you've got Cable. You got 2 different Cables. One of them, the older Cable, getting killed right off the bat, while the younger one comes in. Send the teenage X-Men home. Yeah, it's it was an interesting story, I thought. Pretty well done. It was a nice. It capped off the that era of the X Men pretty well. The and in fact the having the three titles that were all color coded, X Men Blue, Gold, and Red, was part of that whole thing. Next we got Fall of the Mutants. That was it's the Fall of the Mutants is loosely a storyline. You've got three separate Fall of the Mutants stories. There's an X Factor story, a New Mutant story, and an Uncanny X Men story. The Uncanny X Men story is probably the most important, as the X Men were shown sacrificing themselves for the rest of the planet, and so, but they were at the last minute they were brought back and basically said, okay, yeah, so you're now invisible to surveillance. The world thinks you're dead, so, do good things and stuff. Finally, we've got Necrosha. Now, Necrosha is, for all intents and purposes, Blackest Night X-Men edition. I still like the story, though, and I throw it here as the runner-up because I kind of like seeing all the various dead X characters back. And it was kind of neat seeing Selene as a primary villain as opposed to, Magneto or Apocalypse or Sinister. It was nice seeing someone that, everyone knows is that powerful, but just hasn't done anything. So, anyway, so, what's at the top spot? The Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas. To me, the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas are about how power corrupts, or power and how it corrupts. But the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas took the X-Men onto the cosmic stage, as well as introducing longtime X-Men antagonists, the Hellfire Club. Pretty sure it's also the Starjammers are introduced through it, which includes Cyclops and Havoc's father. And did not introduce the Shi'ar, actually. They'd already existed, but it did thrust the X-Men into Shi'ar politics. Oh boy, did it do that. But anyway, it's part superhero story, part space opera, and part character study, and it truly to me, it sets the bar for what an X-Men story can be. But anyway, that is it for now. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and PayPal can be found in the description box down below. Hit the bell icon to be notified when I put new content. And this is the Rock and Roll Spock signing off saying, live long and rock hard.